Okay, everyone, it's 2 o'clock. We're going to go and get started now with the next session here. We're going to continue to talk a little bit more about the task manager. And this session is going to be a little different. Tony's going to do a lot of the moderating, but in this particular session, we want to do a little presenting information and then kind of continue what we just did with the end of the last session. Q&A. Please, anything having to do with task manager processes, change management, really anything in the product, we're open to talk about during this particular session, but we're going to focus on the task manager. Talk a little bit about how we set up a change process or any kind of process really within Issuetrak. And Paul and I both are going to do this session. So we thought we'd kind of go back and forth a little bit, and you'll have a little Paul and a little bit of me, try to give some of the best of both of our perspectives on things. So Paul, let's start out a little bit. Of course, there's Paul, there's me. And we're going to kind of walk through a process. That's what we're going to begin with. So, but again, we're going to encourage you to ask any question you want. Tony's going to gather those and ask them as he can. And if not, then we'll add them at the end of the session. So we'll try to get everything done. First thing, we're going to go walk through a process, and then we're going to kind of look at a document. And this is kind of a rewritten document that we've done. It's called Best Practices Working with Tasks and Processes. And that's going to be in our Help Center. And we're going to show you that at the end of the session. So Paul, let's get us started.
All right. Well, and I wanted to encourage everybody.
Stop sharing, Paul. I'm got it. Go ahead and bring up your that workflow.
Yeah, let me bring this up here. So you guys saw me try just a minute ago trying to open a JPEG, right? Well, that was a JPEG of a workflow. So let's see if I can do that now. Here, I've already got it. Was able to get it open. There we go. Now I'm sure that is too small for everybody to read. So let's see if I can go full screen and get this a little bit better. Oh, come on. There we go. How's that, guys? Better?
Yeah, you just got to scroll some.
Yeah.
Now, so go ahead, Paul.
This is a process. So the first step in putting anything into Issuetrak is kind of planning, right? And that kind of gets lost in, well, I know what I want to do. Well, do you really know all the steps involved, right? The first step should always be planning. We think about what we want and define it, because it's really easy to put a well-defined, well-thought-out process into Issuetrak when we know all the steps. It's nearly impossible to put a really good process into Issuetrak if we don't know the steps, right? I think you'd agree, Mike. So the first step in this, the first thing to do is to kind of define what you want, right? Define that process. And this is a process diagram that Mike and I came up with how many years ago? It's been a long time.
Yeah, at least three years ago.
We are working on a simplified version. In fact, when you see the Help Center article that we're going to show you later, there's a simplified version of this. But for today, for right now, I really kind of wanted to show the more complicated version because it really kind of showcases what we can do. It really kind of gives you that idea that, hey, there can be a lot of people involved in these things. And if you didn't get the sense from that from Mike's talk, right? Yeah, change management is tough, right? Even with a small team.
And it doesn't have, one thing you have to remember, it doesn't have to be a formal document like this one. No. I don't care what you do it on.
Exactly, back of a napkin.
It doesn't really matter. It's just, you have to, it helps to have something that you can visualize. It helps to have something involved with it. And even this one is not complete, to be honest with you.
That's right. So you can see this starts out here in the pill-shaped block with a change request is submitted. Then the request is assigned to the manager for approval. And from there, we go into a series of these diamonds, right? And the diamonds represent our yes, no tasks, right? Approvals in this case, or information gathering. And you can see the first step is for the manager to approve.
So if we're analyzing this to put in Issuetrak, okay? Now, Paul, you mentioned the diamonds and you mentioned the square and you mentioned the pill piece at the top. Do we really need to document the pill and the first square, or should the process start below that? And in many cases, it's below that. It is those diamonds.
And the real answer is, it depends on your process, right? What you
Yes.
need to document. And sometimes it depends on the law. Sometimes we have customers that really need, they may not need to do it because it's an internal process, but sometimes you've got an auditor looking at this thing. So we need to be a little more careful, right?
Yeah.
So we work our way through this, and you can see that as we answer yes to each successive question, we're moving forward in the process. And a no to any one of these really, even though we didn't explicitly draw it in, a no is going to carry us out and kill our process, kill our change, and tell us to stop.
Now, I do want to mention that middle diamond. Is this an informational change? This is kind of a special one because in this particular case, this doesn't have any effect upon the process. Manager approves would say, yes, go to impact assessment needed. But this is an informational item that's been added to this process that says we just need to mark this as being something that's informational or not. So instead of putting in a field in Issuetrak, we did it within the process. Is what happened here. So I just want to point that one out because as you can see, it has an in and an out, but it has no on that. Most all of these are three ways, but that one is not. That's an informational item only.
So then we get to here, some of our first work steps, right? Or the gateway to our work steps, right? Is an impact assessment needed? And if we need an impact assessment, then we've got some steps to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see them listed right here. I don't have to read them to you, right? And if you follow the process itself, we had to kind of stack it a little bit to fit it all on one page or to make the diagram the way it is, and instead of bigger. And you end up coming down to here, right? We make it through our impact assessment if it's needed. If not, we're down here at backout plan, right? So what is our plan in case the change doesn't go right, right? And I would assume that most of the time, right, we're going to need a plan for if that happens, depending on the type of change we're talking about. And if we need a backup plan, then let's develop one. If we don't, let's get right on to the data owner and ask them, hey, is this okay if we change? Is it okay that we make this change? And you can see each one of these has a no option that takes us right out to the end of the process.
Another thing I want to point out, Paul, go back up to the top there where the risk analysis is. Mm-hmm. This is another one of those areas in here that you may need to examine the needs of the program versus the length of task on the issue. For example, this is 4 tasks. Once the impact assessment is assigned, you're going to complete the risk analysis, assign the probability, assign an impact rating, and assign an impact and risk assessment. That's a process that you use. But in this particular case, maybe we don't need to do anything but just assign the impact rating. So even though we may go through the other 3 steps, we may list them as part of the task in Issuetrak for assigning the impact risk. It's going to say that if we assign the impact risk, that means we've completed the risk analysis, we've completed the assigned probability rating, and we've completed the impact assessment. Because we can't get to this step unless we've done all the previous steps. A lot of times I'll document those 3 steps within the note on the task in Issuetrak, and the task itself would just say assign impact assessment rating and assign that on the issue. So you can sometimes only use one step in order to do multiple steps or document multiple steps.
And it all depends on your situation, right? Like we said earlier, sometimes there's going to be a legal requirement or some other requirement that you have those 4 distinct different steps in there and that somebody has actually completed them with a time and date. But sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes it's just not that complex. Sometimes we just say, yes, we looked at it. Let's get on with it, right?
I always believe in keep it simple.
Yeah, if possible. So we work our way down. And we have noticed we're just planning for the change, right? We think about change management. What we've done is we've guarded against those the big problems, the big detractors to change, right? The resistance, the scope creep. The stages before this really all kind of keep that in line, are the efforts to keep those down. And once we get here to approved by data owner, this is where we're actually going to start doing things, right? Schedule the change. If it's approved by the change board, then we're going to move on and notify affected users and actually implement change. We haven't actually made a change till way down here in the diagram, right?
Yeah, another thing that's going to help us with the diagram is we start looking at how we're going to put this into play into Issuetrak, because the diagram is telling us a lot of information here. Some of the things we're looking at, for example, is the blocks that are in there, the processes that we're following. They're going to either be completion task or they're going to be yes/no task. Diamonds are always yes/nos. That's just the way it is. That's the decision point. There always is. But the others are mostly either going to be completion or yes/nos, depending on what we need. For example, notify affected users, that's a completion task. The one at the top where I said I wanted to know whether this was an informational change or not, that's a yes/no. Even though it doesn't do anything, it's still a yes/no task, because I want the response on there for yes, it is an informational change, or no. I want to be specific. Complete doesn't fit, and that's okay. So that's one of the things you want to keep in your back pocket in order to do this. So a lot of what we're doing about best practices can be explained right here just from this diagram. So you're just rolling right through the change process.
Exactly.
Okay,
and I wanted to get us to the bottom of this so we can start talking about putting this actually into Issuetrak, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a look at the bottom of our process, right down here where we close the issue, right? And we work through all of our options, right? Like notifying users that we actually did the change, right?
Mm-hmm.
That happened to us today, right? With the change to the phone system, right?
Right.
Noel said, okay, everybody's good to go. Let's try your phones, right? Or reporting to management, right? In us, that was we used we had an issue that we could submit, or we could do it in Slack, right? We said, hey, I'm having problems, or I'm not. Mine's working fine. And down below here, we've even got added to the change management database, right? Added, so we made this change, we were successful. Let's add this so we know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That becomes your log file.
That becomes
what it does.
Exactly, and it could be just something as simple as a closed issue in Issuetrak, or you could even take the next step and turn that into a KB article and put it in a topic of your knowledge base.
Now, I have run into a couple of situations with a couple of customers recently where the changes that's in that CMDB may be related to multiple databases in multiple areas of the company. And it becomes a single repository of all changes for reporting purposes. I've even used Issuetrak as the CMDB place to gather the data from multiple areas, and use that particular system is nothing more than a repository of all the information related to changes. So I've done that in a couple of different customers already within the last year and a half. So I just want to point that out, that we could act as a CMDB if you needed to.
So I think we're ready to start turning this into tasks, Mike,
Mm-hmm.
or we're a step closer anyway. And when we look at this, how do I turn something like this into tasks? How do we turn this into steps, right?
Now,
Because
Paul,
it's laid out different.
We want to move a little bit faster. We're
Okay.
running a little bit short on time
Right.
today. I do want to get to the new features and try to stay on track to keep this at 90 minutes. So,
Right.
let's see if we can be push it a little bit faster right now so we can get to your presentation on new features.
All right. So the big thing is we want to look at our yes/no tasks. When Mike and I look at one of these things, we zero in on those. We're turning everything after a yes/no task, whether it's on the yes side or the no side, we're turning that into a task group. Then the yes/no task calls that task group. Now, sometimes you'll find it helpful to group those steps within a task group together, and in a visual format, right? Write them down before you have to put them into Issuetrak. And Mike created this great task group planning template. And here you can see, now this is a different change process than what's detailed in our picture, but you get the idea, right? You can see that we've detailed each task group, each sub-process, if you will, and the steps within that. Like this first one just has one
Can you zoom
step.
in a little bit, Paul?
Sure. Let me go to full screen. And this makes it a lot easier when it's time to actually enter the task names into Issuetrak. You can see who they should be assigned to. So if you need to create new groups, you can see the substatuses that should be associated, which become very important, right? And then which group it's going to be called. If anybody needs a copy of this, just let us know. We're happy to give it to you.
A couple things to point out too. One of the things that I also find important to this is it helps me define things that don't exist in Issuetrak. Nothing is more frustrating than going into Issuetrak without all the groups defined, the substatuses defined. If they're not there, you've got to come back out and rebuild them in another place or decide what they're going to be. This is your discussion page. This is the discussion for your teams to meet and decide what you want things called, what you want the task. Make the changes here before you even touch Issuetrak. Be comfortable with it here first. That's the first thing I would say with this.
And we
that
have a
gives
lot.
You an ability.
We have a lot of customers that use this as their CMDB also. They're using this to show this is our record of the process we created, right? Instead of having to use Issuetrak for that.
And what I end up doing a lot of times, I create, like for all of our, some of our internal processes have this uses the documentation for it. So when we want to make changes, we can go to the document, look at how it's going to affect the rest of the process and how those changes need to be made before we do them.
All right.
So it becomes your documentation of the process.
Now I did want to show you guys how this looks empty because I think it's kind of a different look. But you can see you've got a task group. Every light blue line is a task group, and then the tasks within that. I think it just makes it easier to kind of see. So when we do give this to you, we give you both the example and the empty. Yeah.
Tony, have there been any questions?
Yeah, there was one. It had to do with the, it might be taking a little bit of a step back. It was customers that are using Issuetrak for incidents, and then they pick up the change management usage. And trying to keep track of all those, they were asking what the best practice was, and well, my response was nice and easy. I just use your class filter for it.
Yeah, that would be my first indication too. There's a couple of different things that you can do now within Issuetrak that hasn't been available in the past. Number one is use the class functionality is the first thing I would do. So if an incident becomes a change, then you can just change its class and keep all the information related to it. The other thing is sometimes people need to have both an incident issue and a change issue. If that occurs, there is a new associated issue user-defined field that you could add to the form so that you could have an association added in there by just putting the issue number in. And it would say, okay, this change is essentially associated with these incidents. So you can have 5 incidents in one change if you want to do that. It's a nice way of creating a link between the issues without having to create a whole lot of overhead. I'm also running into some customers that have a change database that is not Issuetrak. Incidents in here. And so what we want to do is you could also use one of our other user-defined fields called a hyperlink field that puts a hyperlink to maybe the other system. So again, you have a quick clickable link between the Issuetrak issue and the other change system. So it makes it very easy for you to maneuver between the two and link them together. So either one of those capabilities could be very important for us to use with that. So I think that's an important understanding is what tools do we have that allows you to view linked issues or types of changes. The other thing you could do is change the issue type. That changes the form and changes everything around it. Sometimes that's a good idea, sometimes it's not. Again, it comes back to what is best for you. That would be my response to that.
So I'm looking for an example of those new UDFs, and I think we've got an example here in CS training. Let me see.
And there was your dashboard filter too. You just had shown.
Yeah.
Yes, sure. One of the nice things about dashboard, about using the class feature, is that it can filter the dashboard, and that really does give you that opportunity.
Give you all the changes that are in there.
This is a change issue. It's something we're going to do as a team, or this is an incident. This is something.
Yeah, this is CS training. Doesn't have the change in it. IT does.
Which is why we were using IT. And
yeah, IT has got more of those examples in it.
Go right back to it. And if you can see, there's the class, there's incidents.
Yep.
And
then you see change at the
there's
top.
Change request right there.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still on the dashboard.
Yeah, it gives you great reporting of changes. And all you're doing is, you're not changing the issue type. All you're doing is changing the classification of the issues from one class to another. That's all you're doing.
All right, but the new fields, Mike, do we have some of those new fields built in yet to?
I want to say yes, but I don't know which one it is.
All right, fair enough.
Try the change request at the top. Try the management one. Up at the top, CR. Oh, there's no. Where's the CR?
This one's got ED at the top.
Oh, you're still in CS training, dude.
Yeah, you want me to be in IT?
IT training. And try the one that's design change. Manufacturing design change. ECRs. Engineering change request essentially is what this would be. Let's see if I added it on this one or not.
I don't think we have.
We may not have added it.
Action plan change time.
There it is. Associated issue. And there's a link right below it.
Mike, I got to give you a little more credit here. There you go.
But so this is where if you put in 1044, for example, and do add, then if issue 1044 exists, it'll go ahead and add a hyperlink there. If you want to hyperlink another issue, if you just want to put a link to someplace else, you can put in there www.issuetrak.com and you have a link to issuetrak.com. The other thing, click on number 440 after you do that too.
So here we go. See now that
what's nice about when you put in 440 here is if you scroll down to the bottom, well, this is a CR, so it's going to have it at the bottom. If there's an associated issue, normally it's going to go ahead and give you the link to the other side.
I think this is the associated issues field, and it was related.
Related. It's the same one.
I think we can. Yeah. I think we're. So this is why.
It's supposed to put an issue on the way back. Yep, we got to look at this one. You should be seeing a link both ways.
Oh,
it's the way the software is designed. It was originally designed. Oh, you didn't submit it. I know why,
because I didn't take it. It's not this one's not a live one.
Oh, that's what it is.
But if this were a real, if I had hit submit, then you would see it in both places.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's what it is. That issue has not been created yet.
Yep.
That's what it is. But yeah, that's the way to do it.
Before we run out of time and get a time close, can you show us the new features that you were covering?
Yeah. Paul?
Sure. All right.
Your turn.
Well, all right. So I don't need but about 5 minutes on this, honestly. I don't want to make too big of a deal. We did have a release this month, right? So this is my kind of turn to talk. At 12.3 came out, right? And I wanted to remind everybody first about where they can get the release notes from, so they can know, so you guys can know out there when new things happen. And they're in our help center, right here. You just go to helpcenter.issuetrak.com, or you can go to issuetrak.com and find the help center there, or in your Issuetrak site, just click the question mark and you'll be taken to the help center. There's a link for the release notes right at the upper right of the page. All right, so let's dig into what was actually in this. And honestly, it sounds bad to say, but there's not a lot you're gonna see, but there's a lot you're gonna feel, right? And this is one of those releases, we built a lot of security fixes and patches in that you will feel, right? So you can feel more secure using Issuetrak, but you're not gonna see the changes in, you're not gonna see the changes, right, on the front end. And I'll show you kind of some of these security stuff that we built in. We turned off the verbose error messages. So if Issuetrak was throwing some error message like, oh, SQL credentials not accepted or something like that, right? Then a hacker could use that to hack their way into the system to gain access to your database provider. Now, they'd have a hard time doing it if you were a cloud-based customer, but if you were hosting your own, then there could be problems there, right? And turning that off helps. Turning that off kind of keeps that from happening. The other thing is we turned on the debug parameter. Now this sounds weird, right? In the web config doc that tells your web server how to handle Issuetrak, we said turn debug to false, and it kind of follows along that same lines, right? If there were some error in the way Issuetrak was rendering, then your IIS server would say, hey, I've got a problem rendering this, right? Unless that debug parameter is set to false, then it doesn't send those messages out. And it's kind of along the same lines, that idea that we're not going to let malicious folks know when there's a problem with the application.
And the big thing about this, Paul, is mostly behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, exactly.
These are mostly some behind the scenes things that are not actually new features that you're going to see, but they're improvements to the backside security that really makes this improvement. So, because you're going over the head of a lot of folks.
Okay. So let's go a little. We'll go a little faster. Page load time, right? That little favicon.ico, that little guy, right? The little tiny image that goes up in the tab. We've improved the load time on that, so you don't have to spend a lot of time waiting. There's some stuff we did.
Customizable too.
That is.
Yeah, that's a customizable feature.
We did some things with jQuery and the path relative style sheets. I don't even know what those are. I mean, anyway, secure cookies. Everybody's kind of familiar with web cookies. If you browse the internet, right, you accumulate these things. And there are some things that can read those cookies, except if you're using Issuetrak now, they are secure. They are encrypted in transit.
Yeah, so the big thing on this is improved security. That's what this is all coming down to. All of these things that he's talking about are improvements. Now down the bottom, there's also what's fixed items in there at the bottom, like dashboard. So you do have a lot of things. And there's also been a patch release off of that, as Paul would mention at the bottom.
This was the patch release before 12.3, after 12.3, that's right.
Yeah, it came out after 12.3.1.
And we put in some more things.
Now, so as Paul said, go to the Help Center for information on this. So do this. Also, let's see if we can go to that best practices document really quickly. I wanted to point out that Paul and I have been involved in a project with the Tech Ops team. And we've been improving some of the documentation that is in the Help Center. So you will see some changes to the documentation. The information that some of you may have seen in the IT training library that Paul and I produced, where we've had a PDFs being offered to you, we're putting those into the Help Center now. So we're transitioning a lot of that information into content within here. And you're going to see some structural items that are going to be different, both in best practices and about articles especially. So
the big thing is it's giving us a chance to rewrite these because they haven't been updated in a while, right?
Yeah.
That's the big thing. We put a lot of effort and a lot of time in rewriting and updating these with new best practices some of the time, right?
For example, if you're not familiar with a particular feature, I would always say go look it up on About first. There's a lot of About articles in there, and they give you a good general overview of the feature, and then it points to other articles like this, like the simple processes and things like that. That's actually headers within this document, and it may have additional documents at the bottom that are listed that'll help you out. And we're going to improve this as we go forward, but this is one of the documents that we've just completed a rewrite for.
Now, this document, if you guys want to view it, please let us know because we can give you the URL and you can get to it, but it's not available in the Help Center for search yet. Even though it's been published, it's not linked up to the search part of it. So just let us know if you guys would like a copy of this. We're happy to give you the URL so you can view it. And I'll get to the bottom where the other documents are here. There we go.
Well, Tony, it's going to be about time to wrap this up. We're getting about almost at 2:30, and we do want to try to end up on time to be very cognizant of what's going on. So we'll try to go ahead and get all the URLs of everything that we mentioned today. We'll send it out in the survey that we send out after this, and in the documentation. We'll have the marketing team update that so we can get all those URLs to us. So the other thing is the survey. We do appreciate if any of you would please respond to the survey because we would love to get your feedback, especially on the things that you would like to see us do in the future. We really would like to get some feedback. We're coming to the end of the year. We're going to continue to do this, and we're still developing exactly what items we're going to be doing, not only toward the end of this year, but going into next year. So give us some feedback. We'd appreciate hearing from you. All right. Tony, you want to wrap this thing up?
No, I will. I'm happy to. I just wanted to, in addition to Mike and Paul thanking you for your time, really all of our customers, thank you so much for your time and just your continued support of Issuetrak, and we view our relationship with you as a partnership. We enjoy that relationship. All three of us, Mike, Paul, and I, we're all customer facing, available but there's many other teams within Issuetrak that sometimes they're like the support people, you're engaging them, but then there's a lot of other people, the developers, the accounting people, the marketing people. So we all work together to support you. We appreciate your time, and we'll regroup again next month. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.